Hello and welcome back to the CQC video tutorial series. Normally we don't do videos on individual drivers that often, but the ZWave driver for various reasons is fairly complex. So instead of having to write a small novel of written documentation, we wanted to make a small set of videos that would cover some of the basics quickly. So it's a lot easier in some cases just to show than to say. So we're going to do 2, maybe 3 videos here to get you introduced to the ZWave driver, and the written documentation can just provide you with reference material for the details. So the first thing we want to get into here is the issue of master controllers. So we'll start with that. All ZWave networks are managed by a master controller, and this is usually the one that you use to create the network, and you use it to add units to the network and remove units from the network, and it will be the only one that has that ability. And everything else is added to that master controller, and it provides them with information about the network and security, key information, and stuff of that nature. And our driver basically just looks to it like any other ZWave unit. It's nothing special. ZWave never really dealt with the issue of automation system integration. So really the only thing that you can do is just act like you are a ZWave device. So you add our driver to the ZWave network just like you would any other. There are various types of master controllers. In this case, we're looking at a software one called Vizia RF, which is made by Leviton. And there are also hardware ones. They sometimes can be a little more limited because ZWave continues to evolve, and sometimes they may not keep up over time. And there are also things like SmartThings and other sort of hubs that have ZWave support in them, and they provide that master controller functionality because they assume that's all you're going to be using. We don't recommend that you use something like SmartThings if you're going to use CQC as your ZWave controller, because it assumes it owns the world and it may do things to the units to configure them that would conflict with what our driver needs to be done. So we would suggest that you use something like this or a hardware controller. Since our driver, as mentioned, really just looks like any other device, you add it to the ZWave network just like you would any other device. And if you're familiar with ZWave, and presumably you are if you're watching this video, you set the master controller up to include the device, and then you go press some button on it and it will ask the master to include it. And the same thing happens when you add our driver to the network. You're just including it as a device. So let's go ahead and load our driver up here. I just selected add driver. Sorry, that was off of your screen. And we want the ZWave driver, and this is the one you want, the ZWave USB controller V3. Don't be confused by V2 as in V2 device class support. This is just the 3rd iteration of our USB driver. So select that. I'm just going to call it ZWave. In my case, it's COM10. And that's the summary, and that's all good. And now it will load up, and it'll take it a second to recognize the Z stick. We are using the Aeon Gen 5 Z stick. That's the only one we support currently. Others may work, but we haven't tried them yet. So let's go ahead and bring up the client interface for that. And basically what you'll see is a list of units here. And when you select one, there will be editable attributes here. We don't have any yet because we haven't been added to the network. And if we look over here, we haven't really created our network yet either. The only thing in the network is the installer itself, the main master controller. So let's go ahead and add ourselves to the network. So we're just going to press include here, and it says what we need to do. And then we'll go over to our driver and do include exclude and hit start. And now it's replicating information from the master, of which there is not very much right now because there's nothing there. And now you can see us joining the ZWave network securely, which we want to do so that we can talk to locks. And in a second here, it will complete and we can give it a name. I'll just call it CQC. And it's done over on our side. Now you can see that there are 2 units. These are actually the master controller and our driver. And they're both disabled because there's nothing that we need to get from these types of units. There's nothing that you would control there. So rather than have them just take up time, we disable those automatically. And if you select those, there's like really nothing you can do because they are disabled and they have no editable attributes. So now what we need to do is actually add a device to the ZWave network that we can play with. And we'll do this in a way that you probably wouldn't do it. We'll add a few different types one at a time so that we can demonstrate some attributes of specific types of units. So in your case, you probably already have a network built and you would just bring them all over at once, or you would add them all and then bring them all over at once and kind of get this all over quickly. But we want to basically step through different types of units and introduce you to their unique characteristics. So we'll save that for the next video. So for now, we're just going to leave it at that this is how you get the driver installed and this is how you add it to the ZWave network.